What's up, guys? Welcome back to the caves, and today I want to talk about something a little bit niche and maybe controversial to some people. We all know about the perk system in Deep Rock Galactic and how you can customize and set up your own perk loadouts for various situations. There are a lot of perks to choose from among both passive and active perks, and you mostly have the freedom to experiment and put together interesting combinations. Now, the reason I say mostly, as well as the title of the video, is because there is one perk that I feel is just way too dominant and to a degree problematic over the rest of them, and that perk is Iron Will. If you're unfamiliar with Iron Will, essentially it is an active perk that allows you to temporarily revive yourself once per mission. When you do this, all of your weapons are reloaded, you move faster, your pickaxe does more damage, you are resistant to slowdown and immune to damage, although the perk description itself doesn't actively say that. And another thing that the perk does that it doesn't directly tell you in the description is if you gain health in any way during the revived state, you will permanently stay up and it will act as basically a free revive for you. Now, at first glance, you can probably see how this perk is really strong. It is incredibly effective. It can keep you alive. It can get you back up when you're down. It can save you from various situations. It can save a team wipe. It just has a lot of overall power that can really save missions in dire situations. Not to mention that if paired with Field Medic, you can save an entire team wipe from happening. So at this point, I hope it's clear to you that this perk is really good, almost too good to a degree. And that's why I'm making the claim that I feel it's a little bit problematic, not for negative reasons, but because it's so universally useful and effective that it essentially negates almost all of the other active perks from being useful and more or less reserves a perk slot in most builds. If we look at all of the other active perks in the game, with the exception of maybe one or two, they all have something that is potentially useful, but also have situations where they don't do hardly anything or are just straight up useless. Beastmaster, while being a fun perk, don't get me wrong, and it gives you Steve, unless you grab something like a guard or you have something like regenerating bugs active, and even if you're also just on a higher hazard level, Steve doesn't really do a whole lot and is more just a distraction for the bugs. Berserker does have its uses sometimes, but most of the time I simply see it paired up with Iron Will along with Vampire, so in essence this acts almost as just an accessory to Iron Will. Heightened Senses can be good solo, but loses a ton of its value once on a team, and even more if it's on a dependable team. Hover Boots is literally a meme in the community and has very niche uses, although some people do like it. See You in Hell has always had a very awkward feel to me, and in general, it just doesn't have as much effect as you would think, especially with the activated ability. Shield Link does have some decent utility, but it is a perk that is pretty much useless if you're running solo. The only other two perks that I would say come even close to Iron Will's level of utility are Dash and Field Medic. Dash is a very good general use ability that can help you escape dangerous situations, get to better positions, and get out of problematic areas in which you might go down if you stay there for too long. And Field Medic, while being another perk that is effectively useless in solo, it does have a very strong benefit when actually on a team, even more so than Shield Link. So then we reach the main culprit in this video with Iron Will. Iron Will basically completely ignores all of the negative drawbacks that I've said about every other perk up to this point. It's really good in solo or on a team. It's good at high hazard and low hazards in basically any form of content. There's rarely a bad time to use this perk, although there are irresponsible times to use this perk. And ultimately, there is never a situation where an activation of this perk is unwelcome or unneeded in some way, shape, or form. Unless you completely whiff and mess up using this perk, it will pretty much always save the team in a powerful way. So then, okay, the perk is powerful. That's fine. Why does that make it problematic? Well, it's because it's so powerful that it is just assumed that everyone is going to be running it, especially at higher hazard level content. For lower tier content, it really isn't as prominent as an issue, but once you get to things like Haz 5, Hazard 5+, deep dives, elite deep dives, it's basically an unspoken rule that everyone runs Iron Will as one of their perks because it's just so universally accepted that it is something that will save the entire team if things go bad, that it's not even spoken among the players. It just carries so much weight and can make a situation so much better that it is pretty much unheard of for people to not be running Iron Will at a higher hazard level content. If you think about it, on a well-organized team that has all Iron Wills, you essentially have 4 saves on a mission attempt. So if things go really bad and you're well coordinated with your team, you could essentially save yourself from 4 potential team wipes throughout the course of a mission, which is incredibly powerful. And that's not even taking into account deep dives, where each stage your charges for active perks reset. which give it even more value than it already has. All of these things translate to when you are putting a build together, you essentially only have 4 perk slots to work with instead of 5, because one of them is inherently going to be reserved for Iron Will. And that is where the problem factor comes into play. When something is so overwhelmingly powerful that it's homogenized across almost every build, that takes away a huge degree of personalization when it comes to putting builds together. Not only that, but it sets expectations for the players in terms of what people are going to be bringing onto missions. Now, before I go any further, because I know I have already made some of you upset, I am not saying not to run Iron Will or shame anyone if they do or don't run it. However, there are others out there who would say something like that, and that is another problem that this perk brings in some cases. It is pretty much unavoidable that in any game that you play, even something as casual and friendly as Deep Rock Galactic, that there are going to be players who want to basically just make it as efficient as humanly possible and, for lack of a better term, want to be just meta slaves in order to get through the missions as quickly as possible. Now, don't get me wrong, when it comes to higher difficulty content, it is definitely warranted to bring higher valued stuff, but at the end of the day, Deep Rock is not a game for incredibly competitive players, and once it gets to a point where people start behaving that way, that is when the real problems start to show. Across the board, don't shame anybody for bringing the kind of stuff that they want to bring. The moment we start going after each other because someone didn't bring XYZ hyper meta option, then Deep Rock starts to lose what makes it such a special game to begin with, in that it is not a hyper competitive game, it's not a comp shooter, it's not a hero shooter or anything like that. It is just a game where you can go to sort of get away from those particular types of titles, which I think a lot of people really appreciate. And min-maxing, at least in my personal experience, has never really been something that I have been super prioritized about. And the moment you start to break down the numbers that intensely and start to go after people because they're not bringing the best of the best, then that's when the game starts to sort of not feel fun anymore. I think the real biggest thing that's coming out of this video is something that we all probably already know about, and that is that the perk system really needs a rework and an overhaul, because many of the perks are just outdated and just don't see nearly as much play as they should, or just the level of quality from one perk to another is just incredibly vast. You know, we have perks like Iron Will and Dash, which are incredibly powerful, but then we also have perks like Strong Arm and Second Wind, which don't really see a whole lot of play, at least in my experience. I mean, if you're a Strong Arm main, let me know down in the comments. And again, I'm not trying to throw shade at anybody who uses Iron Will or who doesn't use Iron Will. I just think that the perk is in a very unique and privileged position where it is so incredibly strong and useful that it is, to a degree, adding a bit of problem to the game in terms of build crafting. But eventually, when they do decide to do a perk overhaul, hopefully this will all be justified and fixed. And many of the things about Iron Will that make it very powerful could easily be rectified in one way, shape, or form. They could simply make it so that way you don't stay up if you get healed in any way, shape, or form, because that's one of the biggest and most powerful aspects about it, is that you can essentially get yourself back up. That way it's more used in a team situation instead of just being useful in pretty much every way you could possibly imagine. Or they can make the duration of the actual last stand much shorter, that way you don't have as much time or leeway and you have to be a little bit more strategic about how you use it. They can do a couple of different things to it, and I'm not really sure exactly what they would do to fix it. I'm not an expert on that, but those are just a couple ideas that I would have. Well, thank you guys for listening to me rant for a few minutes. Hopefully I didn't make too many of you upset, and I can't wait to see how many people in the comments tell me that I don't know what I'm talking about and that Iron Will is a perfect perk with no issues. But I would like to hear what you guys think about the perks in general. And if you watched this far, let me know down below what your favorite perk is and why. Anyway, I hope you guys found this video helpful and informative. If you did, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, as it tells me what types of videos you guys want to see. Rocket Stone Miners, I'll see you in the next video.